nerds,
Yeah.
their particular nerd interest.
Yes, and for whatever reason, there's a clear like nerd hierarchy where I'm near the bottom for whatever reason. That's where LARPing has ended up.
Some of the stigma comes from one video in particular that surfaced on YouTube, and it had the guy throwing scraps of paper and calling them lightning bolts. And I think that was a hard thing for people to grasp because they see what it reminds them of is when they were kids and they played in the field.
But isn't that exactly the same as somebody looking at playing video games and saying, why are you doing that? That's kids, only kids play games.
So I mean that has nothing to do with an upcoming game, obviously, right? There's no objective PR purpose for putting that clip out there except to give us exposure and, in a sense, almost an emotional connection to some guy we don't even know.
Pretty much. I mean, I think most of the lessons I've taken came from when Jeff Creed and I did GFW radio, and it became popular over time when we would basically go off the script and bullshit. And when we talked about things about ourselves that had absolutely nothing to do with games. And I think one of the reasons it worked was, you know, at the beginning when that podcast was conceived, the idea was that we were to make something that was to promote a magazine, an actual print publication we worked on. And I guess we kind of decided, without even testing it, that it would be far more effective to actually make a podcast that was a product in itself that people could listen to and appreciate, and then would say, hey, what else do they do that's interesting, rather than use that as a vehicle to relentlessly promote the magazine and discuss the stories page by page that were in that magazine. So it was kind of hard going from the press to a studio for one thing, because I was always it was kind of part of our shtick at GFW is to be really skeptical of people that were acting as mouthpieces in the press, and people that were in the press that were behaving as though they were, under the employ of a corporation. And so to avoid, the cognitive dissonance of like being a shill suddenly, it just made the most sense to me to say, like, who do we have here? What are the talent? What are the interesting stories we have here? How can I leverage this and let people know what we're about? So a lot of people kept asking, is it hard? How are you going to make a podcast when you haven't even announced what your game's going to be? But I personally found it was a huge relief. It's like, okay, great. I don't even have to worry about that. I'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. When we need to start, informing people about the game in a special way we want them to be informed. It's like, just basically tell stories.
I think one of the biggest challenges we have is figuring out how to transition the podcast once we announce a game, so it retains its necessary character that we develop for it, but also is talking about a product rather than the people. I mean, we haven't talked about that much. Have you thought much about how we do that?
I mean, I guess to take the product and put it into the public right now, I mean, my thought has been that we will basically maintain what we've been doing, but we'll have a theme. We'll organize every podcast around a thesis, and so when we announce the game, if it's the setting, we'll have a separate discussion about how game designers decide where they're going to set their games in the first place, and then that will be the implicit, and then we'll have the explicit discussion of what we chose for our game.
So you thought about it?
I thought it was
good.
No. One of the challenges, of course, of doing that is that the opportunity for things to go horribly wrong, and it's clear that Irrational has made a commitment to a substantial production process, which means there's lots of stuff that ends up on the cutting room floor. And that's a big commitment, and that takes money and it takes manpower. I've got a few examples of when things probably go horribly wrong. Sorry, James, but you sent it to me, so I have to play it. So this is them interviewing the voice actor for Clank.
We cut this entirely. This was so bad. We had this stupid idea that, and our writer told us it was stupid. And we said, well, he's coming into the studio, let's have him do an interview on the show as Clank. And he's like, but, he knows the character, but he can't write Clank while he does the voice. And we're like, well, we'll just kind of live it, it'll be okay. And this is the horrifying train wreck. And that has never before been heard.
I'm wearing pantaloons, actually. So they were cool to wear, so I wore them here. To Insomniac. Wearing, actually, do you call them flip-flops? Flip-flops. I'm wearing flip-flops. That's my favorite word now, flip-flops. We should put that into one of the games. Ratchet, where's my flip-flops?
Yeah, see, I'm completely down with it. See, we can take ideas from
flip-flops. Flip-flops.
respect that. However, Shawn and Ken, you made a different decision with this one, which I still laugh about. I can't even click on this without laughing.
Shawn Robertson, if you were in control of Bioshock's marketing, what would the #1 bullet point on the back of the box have been?
Dog in a wheelchair.
On that same store standee for Bioshock have been.
Just the dog in a wheelchair.
Shawn Robertson, #1 album of all time.
The dog in a wheelchair.
Shawn Robertson, what was your SAT score?
Dog in a wheelchair.
Shawn Robertson, what do you visualize when your wife's not doing it for you?
A frog with a funnel coming out of its head.
If you ever on the Wheel of Fortune, what puzzle would you prefer to play?
Dog in a wheelchair.
What does the baby changing table in the Superdome smell like?
Dog in a wheelchair.
You guys sent me the pre-release of that episode, like, I don't know, a week or two before you were going to air it. I literally thought you were joking. I was like, oh, this is a great show, and I'm taking notes and stuff, and I'm like, oh, there's a beat here, and all of a sudden making all these serious notes, and I get this thing at the end, it's like, is this just a joke?
In your commentary specifically, because I was asking you for feedback, what you thought of the direction that you were taking with it, was that you need to get rid of that segment.
I did. So tell me why I'm wrong.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'm like, it's not funny to me anymore because I've heard it so much. And I just kind of like, I don't know, I've been called like a humor pickle where I latch onto something, wear the shit out of it, and then like just forget about it forever. And it was one of those things at the time, it's like my instinct said, this will work, and let's just do it. And I just knew, and I told Ken, because Ken very much, wanted to take everyone's opinion into account. I said, I think it'll work, just leave it.
But this is typical for any development. I mean, there's so much stuff that almost gets cut. I mean, for those who don't know, Big Daddies almost weren't in Bioshock. Like, the best stuff quite often is almost cut quite often because it's usually the stuff that's most weird and most strange and most different than what you see. And so, you have this part that goes on and on forever, and it's one of those things that either it's going to be torture or it's going to be like, this was hysterically fucking funny. But the reason it's funny is it just not stop, and that's a risk, but also that's why it works.
So there are times, however, when things go awry, and this is less the case on the show that you're producing, but when you're out there on other people's shows, when things can go awry. So like this is a clip of I think Ken's second appearance on Larry's show, which I have edited, Ken. So.
Ken, before I let you go, I asked you this last time. I asked this of all my guests. You know what's coming. What's your gamer tag?
And you told him. I mean, this is an issue, is when you put yourself out there as a public figure, what kind of privacy can you have anymore?
Look, I mean, there are trade-offs. It's not like we're, like, any game developer is like Britney Spears, but not walking down the street, except for Elliott. And it's a very, actually, that was a little, when all of a sudden my Xbox started exploding, when that first came on, that was a little weird, but look, it's really sweet. At the end of the day, you've got all these group of people who, like, care about what you do, reaching out and wanting to be your friend or want to talk to you. Now, I'm actually, it's going to surprise some people, I'm actually a pretty shy person. I'm not a very social person. So, like, I'm always afraid that somebody's going to ask me to play a game with them, and then I'm going to, like, interact with anybody. I'm very much a single-player gamer, and that was the only part that made me a little nervous because, like, getting into a conversation with somebody, talking to them, might be a little strange for me. But that's just because I'm shy and weird. But it's very flattering that so many people like what you do and want to talk to you. So,
do people say no, Larry?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I tend to get no's more than yeses, particularly because of the reach of the show, and they're just almost what Ken is saying. They don't want to. They don't interact. And it's not that they're afraid to. They're just like they're so busy working on their game, or they're focused on some other things right now, is that sometimes they just don't have time to go online, and they're actually afraid that someone's going to have a pending friend request for like 9 months.
Right.
That's what people told me.
Right, and then I totally understand that. I mean, because you can't have 11,000 people